you'd invite someone for an interview and they say, I'm in town Thursday, are you around? And you go, well, we're in Manchester.
This sort of sense of a preconception almost of what an agency up north, is and what sort of work they do, and you've sort of actively challenged that in the way you've set Meanwhile up.
Yeah.
Starting with the name of the agency.
We, I think always there's like Crispin Porter was set up in Boulder in Colorado and became one of the biggest agency, 10 years ago in the USA. Various people like that. We just don't really feel the need that you have to be in London, and I think that's really important. And I think the trap you fall into being called regional is a bit of a slight on you, and I think it's a term that is probably used by agencies that reside in London, and there's a degree of protectionism around that, but we are not restricted by our location. Our location is more of a lifestyle choice than anything. And in the recent round of recruitment we had, you'd invite someone for an interview and they say, I'm in town Thursday, are you around? And you go, well, we're in Manchester.
I do think it's more of a perception in the industry, within the industry, as it is like not necessarily with the client so much. I think clients just want good work and right partners. But I think in a way we've benefited from that because we've been able to offer that point of difference. Yeah. And it set us apart when we were starting out. Yeah. And sort of it was a good story for us to build on, because it like, as a creative, James worked a little bit in London, but for the most part we spent our whole careers working outside of London. And we've been seeing that perception all the way through, from independent agencies to network agencies and everything in between. And we've had to work hard, and we've had to take hold, make the most of more opportunities because of that perception that we're regional.
I think there's like a false sort of perception as well, isn't there, around the clients, almost like they need a reason not to work into London. Their location, they're in the northeast, so that's fine. They can work, as you say, with a regional agency. But there's not really.
When you look at it, most clients don't reside in London.
No,
like almost
there's a lot
head office.
There's a lot of business, headquarters and things based outside. Which I know you mentioned it as well about sort of attracting talent and how you've kind of tackled that. Is it just naturally you're sort of judging talent on who applies and then just reviewing the location from
location is relatively irrelevant. We require, and it's important for building the team, for everyone to be in the office a couple of days a week. Michael, our CD, lives just outside of London, and he can come up a couple of days. So no, we don't discriminate. Whereas 10 years ago, if we were in Manchester and applied for a job in central London, it would be a problem.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about pitching. I know you've obviously been doing a fair bit in your first couple of years, and really successfully at doing that. What do you feel? Do you feel like there's an equation, or is there a particular way you approach it?
No, everything's different. I suppose and it's not rocket science. It's why we're called Meanwhile. Actually, is that we're pitching for anyone. We look at what they're doing and what everyone in their sector's doing, and then basically don't do that and do something else. And whether that's find an insight that's unique, or a way of a creative idea that's completely unique in the sector, because sectors do fall into type after a while. And when somebody does something outstanding, it stands out and everyone thinks it's amazing.
And then everyone follows suit.
Pretty much, yeah. But that's the thing, is that you kind of just, as long as you're leading the way, it's a chap called Greg Hahn said, it's important to ask a client, remind a client they can't afford to be average, or they don't have the budget to be boring. I think it's actually the quote. But it's that's our approach, is we are never going to present more of the same. We're more revolutionary than evolutionary.
And do you kind of take that in as part of your sell, in a sense of
definitely
when you go into
it, like James said, it's the name of the agency. That's kind of why we exist. And I think it's like we've always thought that way before we had an agency or whatever. It's not stopping when most others would. It's then pushing beyond, like a part of the Meanwhile way of working is like, well, all right, we've got this idea, but now how can we drive it forward and do something unexpected with that unexpected bit of thinking we've done?
I think we quite like it. It kind of kills us a little bit where we sometimes go a bit too far, and just we're so adamant that we do something different and we'll do whatever it takes. And it makes it really hard at times.
Yeah.
But it's worth it because, it's good for the agency. It's, good for us personally to push what's possible. And ultimately, I think a big part of it is that it gets talked about. So, our work is talked about, might get picked up by a newspaper or, even just in social media. And that's a wonderful thing, but only gets talked about if we've gone beyond as expected.
Describing that, really what pushing the boundaries does is, even if they don't go with that out there crazy thought, it gives a lot more space behind it for you to push the work.
Yeah, I think it's the relationship, isn't it? It's kind of, if you present, you can take nearly 3 years of Chester Zoo, and it's been an evolution. It's got slightly more adventurous each time we go back with their summer campaign, for example. But it's not to say there wasn't some really out there stuff in that first pitch, but the client gets more and more confident in you. They know what's coming. They can see the possibilities, and so you're greasing the wheel for a long time, really, to get to some really good stuff.
I think going back to your original question around like what a successful pitch looks like, I think so we have a philosophy and a way that we like to do work and the sort of work that we want to do, but then it's how you interpret that philosophy for that client. So I think I think so many agencies go into pitches and sort of enforce their way of doing things, and like they have a structure of like, this is what our pitch deck structure is, and we go through this process to get to this, and like we have processes and we have ways of working, but it's slightly more organic, and it's like has the client and the business driven by it, but sticking to that philosophy of like say being called meanwhile.
Yeah. I think a lot of agencies fall into the trap sometimes, don't they, talking about themselves too much in pitch situations. They go in there trying to sell themselves. This is us. This is what we do. Yeah. When in fact the business is sat there going, we know you think that's why you're here, and equally we want the response to be about us. That's what what the brief is.
Our intro is 3 slides long, and we try and get it through it in and get to the 6-7 minutes.
One of the biggest frustrations, certainly you'll feel this, that as agency owners as well now, is the level of investment that you put into these things, time, money.
It's huge. I don't think we had any idea actually before we set up, and without Al to say, do you know how much this is just
costing us?
We had
and if that occasion, then if you get in there and it's clear that you're just there to make the numbers up,
or you're one of there's two, the client is talking to 7 agencies who think, well, he's not really very clear on what you want, or equally if the makeup of the agencies you're pitching against is, say you're one of 3, and we're clearly a million miles away from
the other 2.
Yeah, we're not. Why are we even in the same conversation? Because they do something completely different to what we do. Yeah, there's lots of red flags, and we are very cautious on who we go for.
I think because of our size and because of the way we can afford to be relatively selective, and that, again, going back to that chemistry phase is like so important. Like just from the flip side of like having a really positive chemistry session is like those chemistry sessions are crucial, but a really negative experience, because you can kind of discover where where it's not going to work early on before you make all that investment.
I mean, obviously pitch process is a big part of this that you're navigating, isn't it? I mean, it's long been talked about as a bit of a flawed, but I guess equally like really unfairly weighted at the agency chucking a lot in and often not getting anything out. Is there? Do you think there's a different way of doing it that you guys would?
Some people pay for their pitches, which I think is a shows that they're taking it seriously. I think sometimes when people are just collecting ideas a little bit, which is a bit soul destroying. It's difficult because you're giving your IP away for nothing essentially. Aren't you? You're showing the client what they can have, but some clients expect you to go a little bit too far. It's almost like you're producing the thing.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And
Rolling out a whole campaign.
Which isn't really sustainable for you.
Because you're wasting, it's not just the agency's time you're wasting time with you might speak to a media partner or you might speak to a production partner, and you're reading in all these favours that, you
can't pay.
Yeah, exactly.
When
if you don't win the business, then that's right.
Ideally, and of course we would say this, but when we pitch production companies to make like a film for us or whatever, we only go to one. We have chemistry meetings and think, well, look, we like the work of that director, so we'll go to that director early, like we did with Big Red Button, who made the Tombola film that we made, and just said, look, this is what we want to do, and we want to work with you guys. It's yours. You just, and they're very happy because then they're invested. They're working with us.
Yeah.
And to get to something really great.
I think 9 times out of 10 you could call a pitch after chemistry and go, we'll work with them, do a project. Because often see how it works, and then because again, it's sort of why we like hiring directors quickly is you can spend the pitching time just working on that project. Like again, clients could spend the time that the weeks and months it takes to run a pitch to actually work on the business and work on the
collaborative
work of the thing.
You'd always know when there's 3 directors, you know who you're going to choose, generally speaking. It's like very rare that there has been occasions where you have a chemistry meeting and they're just a dick. It's like
easy to say, I have no chemistry meetings for it. That's why that's there. But definitely the way a good place to start.
Yeah. Do you find like a more sort of gratification or genuine pride from what you're doing now as opposed to when you were working for BBC?
It's kind of a different, I guess so, yeah. Because I suppose meanwhile it's kind of just it was the next great project. The next thing is like, so do you think we could do, let's have a go at that, and here we are. A different sort of pride, I suppose. The advantage at the BBC was that you're already in popular culture, essentially. So if you're doing a campaign for Partridge or Peaky Blinders, you already got a huge fan base that are going to love what they do anyway. Yeah. Whereas, something like Parkrun,
yours it to them.
That's maybe not the greatest example because it already is in popular culture, and people, if you love Parkrun, you're going to love this piece of work. Yeah. But it felt like it broke down some barriers. I know my brother asked me what is Parkrun for the first, and my brother's not remotely athletic.
Yeah, it's been had a lot of people saying they did their first Parkrun.
Yeah, which has been wonderful. But yeah,
actually first time.
I mean, it's been the aim, hasn't it? Of agencies and the creative industry since, I guess it was created in whenever maybe the heydays in the 60s and whatnot of, tapping into human insight and finding a way to articulate that cuts through and feels different and unique, and it's a wonder why it's such a still ongoing challenge.
I think it's just because there's just such a constant shift, isn't there? And people's perceptions just change all the time. And actually, I think going back to what you said with the whole Parkrun thing is if you can shift someone's perception about a thing, like with a piece of work, then it just sticks. And that's what Parkrun you would think, it's about fitness and health in that sense. But you change someone's mindset, go, oh yeah, no, actually, of course it's
about community.
It's not elementary. It's
felt the time. 20 years ago, it was a time trial, a 5K time trial, and then the average time of every Parkrun gets slower every year, which is a real marker of success because that means more people are sort of getting off their backsides on the side.
Yeah, their metric is if the average Parkrun 5K gets faster, then we're failing because we're not bringing enough.
New audience,
but also the type of people that we want to attract that aren't doing it for fit. They're not super fit. Whereas,
it's fine for those to use it as a weekly race or whatever.
Yeah, that's fine. You do a pot when there's always one, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like I said, there's so
laps you 3 times.
Yeah, there's so much more to it than that, and that's sort of what.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Tried to uncover with the work we did with them, all of the stuff we did with them. That kind of came from that.
That's a good sort of insight around how different businesses and brands and sectors have strange measurements for their success, isn't it? As you described there, that the time going up or down is a
Yeah, you know, good when someone says something like, honestly, we could like
it gives you so much ammunition.
Yeah, so you could do 6 campaigns for Park Run that would just land, but you know, you can't have to be focused because they're a charity ain't got loads of money to spend. They've got big media budgets, but yeah, it's such a great model, I think.
So you feel like that as a kind of starting agency building into growth stages, and you know, that pro bono element, you know, in sort of balance to all the paid work you're doing and clients.
Park Run was paid,
wasn't
paid a lot, but it wasn't fully pro bono.
Right.
We have pro bono, we have low bono, which I think is a lot.
We do. I mean, doing sort of charity and good work is important to us.
Yeah.
You know, as much as the commercial stuff, there kind of has to be a balance. We did reach a point where suddenly it's like the charity world gets a sniff that you do charity work, and suddenly everyone's asking for everything, right? You know, we have to be selective, but yeah, we do. Yeah, Park Run is not paying anyone's mortgage, but it's gratifying to do, and it's a great cause that deserves attention.
It's got such a good story. There's just so much possibility with what you can do from that. And, yeah, I mean, when you're a new agency, part of the business model and model for growth is to do work that stands out, and often those charities have really great stories that need telling. So it's an opportunity to do like brilliant work. Actually, the only proactive, fully pro bono piece of work we've done really was the Life Share campaign that we did last year, which was actually Rachel and Michael spotted an opportunity with a Chanel choke.
Right.
That was great. It was like brilliant. Yeah, but one of the few fully pro bono pieces I think we've done. How
do you back to kind of pushing the creative needle, as obviously good examples of how you're doing it as an agency, and from the creatives you've got part of the team already, with like the younger talent coming through, like do you have any advice that you often give, or like a kind of direction to give them?
We're not at that stage yet as a business where we have the bandwidth to have junior talent, I suppose. We're constantly doing book crits and giving people advice, and we do a program called School of Thought in Manchester, which is about developing creatives and helping them get better, which, you know, is really fruitful. Actually, a lot of the young creatives in Manchester coming up are now alumni of that program. We give advice all the time, and it's kind of, again, I suppose it's our approach to creative work, in that, remember, as a student graduating, that you're one of 3,000 graduating at the same time. You're all doing exactly the same thing. What are you going to do to be different?
You're going to stand out.
And I think it's just a really simple thing to think about for yourself. And, you know, a lot of them are, you know, they're not the, you know, most graduates are pretty similar. There's very rarely that one is clearly they're going to be a senior in 6 months' time because they're so talented.
Yeah.
Just making sure they know how to set themselves apart, doing plenty of placements if they can while they're coming up, get as much experience as they can.
Yeah.
We would generally push them towards. Also, BBC Creative is a brilliant breeding ground because we know what that training is like there. Probably more so than, you know, in a commercial agency like ourselves.
If every creative or even just marketeer did a year at the BBC, the industry would be all the better for it. It's almost like a national service.
Yeah,
you're working on so much stuff all of the time. You just get exposed to so many briefs. You're not waiting for the next good brief to come along. It's like good brief. So it's like I would advise any emerging creative talent to try and get in the BBC. And also, like, I think advice for young creatives is I think a lot of young creatives have this mindset of doing something different, like, and then they lose it because they go into an agency and they
conform.
So my advice is just don't lose that naivety and that sort of that instinct to do something different as you progress through the industry. Like, you know, it's like a you know, that sort of childlike naivety that gets beaten out of creatives. You know,
I think it's that sense of making stuff for yourself as well, isn't it? That you come through uni and you've kind of you've had to be very proactive and bettering yourself by making stuff and following your ideas and executing what you can and finding ways to do it. Pulling in favors, working with other friends or graduates, etc. So that's
some people lose it. They get
lose that,
and I think the best creatives don't. I think not with the best creative, but we've kind of never lost that inclination either. All the way through is like, what's the extra thing we can do with
it? It's important to work at places where you're not getting that brief constantly. Like it's a balance, because actually you see creators that go straight, their first job as a BBC is at the BBC, and they do 9 months, 12 months at the BBC, and then they go into an agency and they're like, oh my God, where's all the good briefs? And I have to really work hard, I have to really rush here, and I'm really having to hustle and make things happen, and working late and working weekends. So it's kind of, it's a little bit of both, because instilling that work ethic from day one is like super important. We like James says, we've carried that onto that sort of need to make things happen yourself is like couldn't start an agency without that.
Yes, restrictions are good, I think, but people don't value restriction, because as a creative, being told do what you want is the worst brief you can get.
Yeah, true.
If you're like, this is the number you've got, what's the best thing you can do for $5,000?
Yeah,
it's like, okay,
by its definition is creative, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. We were talking the other day about, we get just as much gratification over a tiny budget as we do
I guess they did. I mean, BBC obviously, being TV in its, in its format naturally, but more and more they will have to, and as are other brands and businesses, like gearing everything towards social first anyway, isn't it? So that maybe the structure and the process is still the same and maybe a little bit archaic, but the output needs to be a lot more.
That's where the sort of that mindset of like thinking, looking at ways to stand out and do things differently came from the BBC, because you go into the BBC and you've got all this like free media space, like they've got wall-to-wall junctions to make all this great content, but you very quickly discover that yes, that's brilliant and that's a big part of how we promote the BBC, but 90% of the people there, you just preaching to the choir. So actually it's like, what can you do in those spaces that will transcend
and find a different angle to
exactly,
it?
And then exactly. And how do you get that idea either on channel and then do something else off channel, or the thing that you make for that junction talked about outside of that space.
Yeah, it seems to be a bit of a shift, isn't it? Or moves certainly see more frequently is like pushing the value of the PR moment rather.
It's invaluable.
Finding that way to be somewhere that's not expected.
Yeah, it's invaluable for like what in a commercial world as well, because like media is so fragmented. You can't just make a TV ad and that'll be it. That'll do everything. So how does that idea go here and go there, and then not getting caught into the world of just taking a screen grab of your TV ad for your 48 sheet poster with a logo in the corner, and it makes you think much more about what the idea is. What's the idea actually there? It's executed in
channel specific
that way. So the Tom Bowler campaign we did was, you can't put a song in a 6-sheet poster. So what's the idea that you take forward, and like that's it's an important distinction to make that I think gets lost so often.
Definitely. Same for social, isn't it? I think often it's, we'll just do a 6 second
cut of the
down of the main piece.
But you can't do that. It's just, I think people see through it straight away. You've got to do something native to that media.
Definitely. Which I guess as an agency growing as well, equally that's coming from the, not always guess the kind of juniors, but you need to be dialed in, don't you, and fingers up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's also the reason not to try and do everything. We try and act more as the orchestra conductor than playing every instrument.
Right.
For that reason, that we would spread ourselves way too thin with the fragmented media world that we live in. It's just then important to let people play to their strengths. And if that requires us to, get someone with a greater understanding of, TikTok or whatever, then so be it.
Our agency model is to
work with collaborators,
be really good at what we're good at, which is the anything that starts with an idea, and how do we then plug in with everyone else, but be that client in-house agent, in-house team, their other agency partners, media, or whatever it is. Ultimately it'll make the work better.
Yep. Keeps bringing in fresh inspiration, doesn't it? And the different opinions.
And not being that, like say, being dead guarded and seeing the value in what someone else can add to the idea that you've come up with.
Is there any, on the flip side, I guess, is there any major fears that you've got in terms of how you would grow or what comes next?
I suppose that there's a fear about, and I think we'll know if it feels too big, which sounds like is a really privileged thing to say, but I think if we feel like we're losing control somehow, and
that creative control,
just that the creative product isn't right, or we're agreeing to projects that, why, there's a judgment on a project. If we're not going to put it on our show reel, why are we doing it?
Because we're not happy to share it, then.
We're genuinely driven by we kind of that old adage of do what you love and the money will follow, and it seems to be working so far, and we'll try and stay with that.
I think that's a danger as you grow. Then it's a really difficult thing to do, but you have to be so deliberate with it that you're not just taking something for the financial gains. Because that's like and like when you have staff, then you have a responsibility, but you also have a responsibility to living up to the promise that you gave that people when they came to work at your agency, that you will be doing great work and be doing work that you're proud of, and not becoming that.
It's about not being short. So you're thinking about the long game, isn't it? Always, and not just taking
the
easy
glory in us for us is like Tim says, having a body of work in 10, 15, whatever years time that we can look back and go, bloody hell, look at that, it's amazing. Rather than we've started up, scaled and exited 17 companies or whatever. Not boring.
Thanks, guys. That brings us to a close. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming down.
Yeah, cheers, mate.